Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, portal season is Costanza season, and we peek into the future of college sports today on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, man, and we got some good stuff to wrap up the week with on today's episode. We'll get into a bigger picture sweeping the college sports nation this week as it relates to college sports of tomorrow. What an inspiring way to describe it. But will it inspire anyone to action? We'll get into some of those details as to some plans being made and laid and hoped for as it relates to the future of not only college football, but the college sports world in its entirety. But we must kick off the program today with some good news for Grant McCasland and the Red Raider men's basketball team. You got to love portal season in one aspect, Chris. If you're a Seinfeld fan, it gives us the opportunity time and time again to consider George Costanza. Am I crazy or didn't you quit? Quit? Quit what? Who quit? Devin Cambridge signals his intention to remain a Red Raider yesterday. And it's one of those situations, Chris, where I guess we never actually saw him in the transfer portal. It was just reported that he intended to enter the transfer portal. So there's some gray area there. There's some, I guess, room for negotiation or leveraging there by either a program or a player. Regardless of some of that context, you wind up with what looked like a really dynamic guy early on this season before his injury, planning on being back at Texas Tech. And any way you slice it, at least to me, that's good news for a Texas Tech basketball fan.
Yeah, I think I expressed some, bit of a surprise when he did enter the portal the first time, or the intention of, it was kind of like, oh man, okay. And then was not surprised, obviously, that he decides to return. Again, essentially, this is a nothing burger in that really nothing ever happened. It was just like reports coming and going. It just gets everybody stirred up, and then everybody going, oh, man, let's hug each other again. I mean, it was just like all for – yeah, and so hopefully everybody's in a good spot with it, team and player and family and all that stuff as it relates to – I again, this is personally my thought. I can't speak for Devin or Grant or whatever, but I'm glad for this to come back because or come back together, even though they were never really apart. Just for Devin's rehab journey, if that makes sense. I think this institution and this staff, knowing that they've dealt with this injury and progressed him to this point, I'm glad to see that kind of be able to continue, because I think that's the best thing for Devin. And so, but maybe it wasn't going to be the best thing for Texas Tech basketball. Maybe Devin was like, I don't know, but I mean, who knows? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's semantics at this point. They're back on the same page. And so a couple of things. One, because of that injury, I think you have to understand that, the timetable here, it may not be what people think. Maybe it will be. But I think that if you just say he's going to be good to go and the same player that we saw, in early December when he went down is going to be what we see that starts out the season. I mean, they may not – nobody knows that, I hope that is the case, but – he could theoretically be good to go in October or not until December-ish or something. You just don't know how these things look. And then there's the confidence issue and all that. He had a pretty nasty injury, so I think we'll just have to kind of monitor that. So keep that in mind as you start putting this team together and you start trying to identify roles, in a normal scenario, you would think Devin Cambridge would be a starter. He was last year, but don't just automatically assume that's what you're going to get here right out of the gate, because he may not be ready for that, cleared for that. We just don't know. So there's a question mark right there.
Yeah, a bit of a caveat to the return, and he's back, and it's all good, and it's roll on. There's still a process, obviously, for him to engage in with Texas Tech as far as the rehab is concerned. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, and it doesn't have to mean or be like descriptive of this situation, but what goes on in some of these days or moments where there's like a reporting of someone's intending to do this, whether they get in or not? Maybe sometimes they do get in, but then they return. I mean, is this like, have you seen previously, and maybe you have some examples, maybe you don't, but previously of guys like, is it NIL negotiation time or like negotiation window? Is it playing time negotiation window? And at the same time, there's like this cloud of don't say the word inducement hovering, I guess, over everyone at the same time. Although if you've already been a member of the program, I don't know if that context kind of changes, but we've now seen this happen before. Sometimes, again, they make it to the portal, then they do make it back to the program. Sometimes they get to the portal, they never come back to the program. But can you lend any insight to the layman or the common fan as to what's actually, kind of happening during those 24, 48, 72 hour or a week kind of windows?
Yeah, well, what's interesting here is that essentially nothing happened. That's the weird
cut and dry.
Well, that's the like technically nothing happened. That's the funny part about this particular one. Now, the general public feels like he had his stuff packed. He was moved out. He was gone. He was like, I'm out. And then all of a sudden, it's like he showed back up in a taxi cab, and it's like, hey, can somebody help me with my luggage? I'm back. Well, really, none of that really took place. There's no telling. There's a variety of different options you can get into here. It's the same as why somebody picks a school or doesn't pick a school. Is it NIL related? I mean, palms up. Who knows? Is it role related? Is it medically related? Is it location related? Is it, well, I may have another option that I think would be better, maybe more playing time, maybe more money, maybe closer to home, whatever. Spin the wheel. And guess what? I'm gonna pursue it. And then, okay, they weren't serious about that option. I don't have that option, so I guess I made a mistake. I mean,
right.
So, and here's the crazy thing, Colin, is that most of these guys they can go get into the portal now if they wanted to. Again, I mean, like, as long as that window's open, just because it's been reported that you intend to or you intend to stay, which again, the nothing thing that happened here, again, technically, he could still get in. It would. So there's no rules on as long as you're in that by the end of the window closing, you can still go do what you want, whether you've agreed to something here, whether you have a handshake agreement with the coach on what your role will be or whatever. You can be like, you know what, so-and-so's coming after me. I've heard from an intermediary and they need this, they're willing to offer this, or whatever is going on out there. So that's what I'm saying. That's why the window has to close at some point, because otherwise you're just like, I don't know who's on my team. This is ridiculous. I'm having to re-recruit my guys for for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and all these things. So, but I feel pretty comfortable that you've got, you're a bit of a nucleus here with Chance, Darion. I don't know if we've heard anything from any of those guys publicly. Kerwin, EY, and now Devin. Devin's the only one that's really been in the news. Yeah. As far as reporting and all that stuff. And so, but I think that's kind of what you're working with there, and then we'll see kind of how quickly it gets added to.
There's like talk of intermediaries. I'm thinking of a guy in a trench coat with a briefcase in a parking garage late at night or something, like, hey, I got something to show you. You get
like, all kidding aside, the trench coat people or the whatever. They're going to be all over Phoenix and Scottsdale this weekend, okay? And that's why every head coach and a lot of those coaching staffs go to the Final Four. It's not about, hey, I'm trying to, and Grant, for example, he's still trying to hire another coach. So this is where you can meet with people and gauge interest or find out what's available. But you also meet with the quote unquote, the trench coat people. And like, there's a lot of handlers, agents, whatever, however you want to phrase them, that is a conduit to players. And those people are all over. So all these coaches, that's typically what goes on, and that's the reality of it. I don't know if they are actually wearing trench coats, maybe like more of a golf shirt in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area, but still the point remains. I guess you can't really open up a golf watch and there's not all the gold watches.
That's right. Yeah,
like some of that middle of the mall jewelry that you get, put around your neck and it turns it green. You don't want to buy any big men from those guys.
I don't know, man. Does that even exist anymore? Do we lose that to the 80s and 90s? Like those guys probably open up their trench coat and they got a QR code now to their Shopify account or something. Trench coat's pretty tight though, better than a golf shirt, that's for sure. Trench coat guys, duffel bag boys, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, they're still swirling around not only college basketball but college sports in general. And speaking of college sports in general, let's dive in. First, today's episode brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Speaking of college sports in general, let's dive in to this conversation, Chris, because this has gotten really, really interesting. I won't say in a short amount of time because it actually has been progressing kind of behind closed doors or in the shadows for some amount of time, but now bubbling to the surface this week. It's something called College Sports Tomorrow. And it could affect, well, almost all of us, give or take maybe a range of around 60 to 80 programs. Now, previously in a Power 5 kind of landscape, it was 65 to 70-ish programs who were either in a Power 5 conference or one of those major primary kind of independents. Obviously the Notre Dames, BYU previously, maybe you throw in the service academies there at that time as well. But either way, the College Sports Tomorrow group, if you have not seen, just to give you the lay of the land really quickly, a 20-person group, which includes the NFL's number 2 executive, Brian Rolap, Philadelphia 76ers owner, David Blitzer, and lead organizer, Lynn Perna of Turnkey ZRG, which is a search firm that places nearly all the top conference commissioners, including one of the most recent at the Big Ten. So essentially what they're throwing out there is that a belief that basically the conference model is dead as we know it, and we've got to pivot to one league overseeing college football's highest premier level. There would be playoff berths decided solely on the field, some promotion, some relegation for some of the smaller schools. At the back end of that, you would have players being paid directly with NIL, transfer portal things, all managed again by one group. So they're looking to make that happen ASAP. And you've got college presidents involved. You've got a Roger Goodell, so-called lieutenant. And this Super League has really seemed to grow some legs, at least to a degree. Whether or not it's going to come to fruition anytime soon, I'm not quite sure, as obviously there is some pushback, and there's this thing called network television agreements that have also got to be dealt with, as far as some signatures that the ink is not even dry on yet, Chris, with some of the college football playoff agreements and things like that. But the outline would look something like around 70 programs. Again, all former members of the previous Power 5, Notre Dame. You're adding SMU to that group now as well. And it would basically encompass all 130 plus FBS universities, but you've got that primary group of 70. You would have perpetual members in 7 10-team divisions, joined by an 8th division of teams that would be promoted from the second tier. That almost sounds like the 90s. The 50-plus second division teams would have an opportunity to compete their way into the upper division, kind of creating a promotion-type system similar to some of what we've seen in European soccer leagues. The top 70 teams would never be in danger of moving down, but there would be some so-called incentive for some of those outside of that to possibly move up. So we would say sayonara to a selection committee for the playoffs, which is scratching me right where I itch. My leg is kicking like a Cocker Spaniel just thinking about that thought, as you'd have basically 8 division winners, 8 wild cards go into the postseason. So something very similar to what we see there in the National Football League and on some other levels. Now, whether or not it's going to gain traction further, we don't quite know, but the ACC Board of Directors heard a presentation from this group back in February. You had also planned presentations, gatherings, dinners, meetings, whatever, with the Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12 that were since called off. So those haven't happened actually yet. But again, there are some things as far as hurdles to overcome. But a really interesting idea, and I actually think, even though this is really big and kind of hard to process, and you think, wow, how complicated is this? And, again, how many hurdles are there to overcome? I also think there are some common sense components to some of this, which may ease getting over some of those hurdles. Big question, big thing to consider here, Chris. Where do you start when you're processing some of what this future could possibly look like, and some of that calling on some models from the past, I guess, if we're talking about that future?
I can't believe that the ACC of all conferences would want to take something like this seriously. Geez, I wonder what motivation they would have to do that. Okay, so there's a lot here.
Yes.
This is very much NFL. This is, with a English Premier League or kind of like some of the soccer stuff that we see as far as relegation kind of component added to it, which includes, your group of 5, block, and gives them hope. I think the first point that needs to be made is everybody kind of readily admits the sport is kind of broken. Nobody's really in charge of the sport. People, depending on what conference you're in or what part of the country you live in or whatever, have different opinions on how this sport should be run. I think that this is all inclusive. Okay, so I think that's an important component, because you're going to get people going, okay, we're a part of the party. So this would be something we would be for, like the majority would be, when there's just a select few schools that can go, yeah, we're not going to do that because we can go run this thing off to our own. But there's power in numbers here, and I don't pretend to know how like all the money would work. But here's the other thing, that there's two big things. One is like a massive hurdle, and I guess there's actually a 1 and 1A as far as the hurdles go. But then there's also a reason why you may have to try to overcome those hurdles because of what I think is about to happen. So the hurdles right now, to me, are, I just don't think that, this is the component that they must work through. And I'll be interested to see who wants to play ball here. Because as ESPN and Fox and CBS or whoever's got any kind of rights to college football games, are they going to go, wait a second, we have a deal with this league for the next 6 to 8 years. Like, you're not coming in here and like, going to tear that up. No, we have a contract. We paid really, really good money for this deal. We kind of have a monopoly on the sport if you're ESPN. So don't come in here with your new ideas and then rip up our broadcasting agreement, because we have pen to paper here. We've shelled out a lot of money, and in our future is so you got those kinds of dynamics. And like, everybody's got a different agreement, but most end up into the 30s, like 31, 32, 32, 33, 29 and 30. Like all the leagues are kind of, like 5 to 7 years out as far as like their broadcast agreements. That's a massive obstacle to me, because you're going to have to get all the networks to play ball with you and avoid litigation and all those things. And maybe there's common ground there. I don't know. Okay. The second thing is, does the general person, like I see some flaws with this, but I'll see like, okay, but does the general person want to get away from like a league? Like, and what I mean by that is, and I know the Big 12 now is not the same kind of league, and maybe it would benefit schools in the Big 12 if you kind of divvied it up and you got back more regional and all those things. But are you just telling me that all the folks in the SEC are going to be like, that's cool, we won't have an SEC anymore, and we'll just split it into 2 divisions? And do you think everybody would be okay there, as far as like, depending on the rivalries and some of the stuff that makes college football great? I just think that would need to be carefully, pursed through as far as like who plays who was in a division with who, how do your crosstown division games, all that stuff. So all that to say, there's some good ideas here. There are some, play decided on the field, everybody's included. But here's what I think is about to happen, and here's why this thing is going to have at some point some legs. Maybe they're just walking, or maybe it's a slight jog, but it's going to have some legs. And
maybe it's why. Usain Bolt.
Yeah, well, yeah.
We really get to move it,
because I think most schools out there right now are preparing behind the scenes for some of these court cases not to go their way, and for revenue sharing to be right around the corner in a year or 3.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the very near future, it's going to be like, I don't know whether you want to call it law or whatever, but it's going to get passed in the courts that whether they call them an employee or whatever, but there's going to be revenue sharing that everybody's got to participate in. So that's why you got a lot of greedy, schools out there, and conferences are being greedy because you're just trying to scoop up as much money as you possibly can, knowing you're about to have to watch a lot of it walk out. And I don't know how the revenue sharing component works versus NIL. Are those 2 separate things? Does one replace the other? Either way, the schools are going to be on the hook for this. And that leads to a whole separate set of questions like, okay, well, who participates? Every one of your 400 athletes on campus, just the sports that generate revenue, which is in a lot of schools, that's just football. I think men's basketball does here and some other places, but that's kind of where largely it stops.
Oh, yeah.
So, but you're talking, 10 to 20 million extra expense a year, depending on what they come up with. So if this league is got some structure in place to where it aids that, everybody benefits from it if they provide it, I could see where a lot of schools are going to go, you know what, this isn't such a bad idea, because otherwise we're going to have to cut sports on our campus. We're going to have to, there'd be some tough decisions to make depending on what comes out. So from that standpoint, I think that it's going to have some legs. Yeah. And it's got, because here's what I would say. I bet this is more of a starting to work on this, something that could be a serious possibility in 5 to 7 years when a lot of this stuff, these contracts are up, as opposed to this like happening in the next year or 2.
Yeah.
But
yeah, sure. But time flies, and we'll be there before we know it.
Yes.
And we also know, just like with the most recent round of playoff expansion, where there is a will, there is a way, and that way can show up very quickly when maybe you didn't think it would so quickly, whenever folks get their minds made up. To me, this is the rub. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime, and you shouldn't have to sweat it out when buying tickets to your favorite events, and with Gametime, you never will, because it's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find killer last-minute deals, views from every seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins if you get a little distracted at the tailgate. That means Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Also, the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets. Not just fast, however, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. To me, this is the rub, and you kind of described it there. Football, vast majority, for programs across the country, the vast majority of them, football, by and large, and I mean by a big, big gap, creates more revenue. I think it's like 5 or 6 programs across the Power 5 spectrum, former Power 5 spectrum, where men's basketball led the way as far as revenue. There's like a Syracuse, a Duke. There were some of those. Kansas. Very, very small. I mean, like a handful. And then you've got others who may create some revenue, but they're obviously not leading their athletics department. And then you've got the vast majority that aren't creating jack. Only the football program is creating revenue. And Chris, when you want to get to unionization, collective bargaining for a football conversation, well, what happens then? Softball axed, you're out. There's no such thing as that program. Men's tennis axed, you're out. There's no such thing as that program. Rowing, you're out. There's no such thing as that program anymore. So for the survival of those others, I think you've got to eventually separate these things. And I think there is obviously sincere interest and want to, as far as, preserving those other non-revenue sports. I don't know what the original intent was of all those sports, but I don't think it was to just show up and like, hey, either we make revenue or we're getting rid of this thing. So I think there's going to be obviously enough interest and commitment to want to preserve those sports that you got to find a way to do that. And it seems fairly common sense to believe that the only way to do that, or the best way to do that, is to separate the behemoth known as revenue generating college football. But the other part of this that I'm somewhat annoyed by or concerned with, and you see the name there on the screen of one Gordon Gee. And I'll just bring it back full circle, Chris, to the scene where George Costanza's back in the boardroom with his boss at the other end of the table, and the boss says, "Is that Costanza down there? What are you doing here?" Which is exactly what I would say to Gordon Gee. What the hell are you doing here? He's part of this College Sports Tomorrow group. The same Gordon Gee, who, by the way, right now is the West Virginia president, used to be the Ohio State president, and some of whatever other jobs he had that required him to wear a bow tie and have bookshelves instead of televisions in his living room. But nonetheless, this is the same Gordon Gee that back in 2007 said, quote, "As far as a playoff system is concerned, there will not be one." He said, "They will wrench a playoff system out of my cold, dead hands. It's too much of moving toward having universities being farm clubs for the pros." Gordon Gee, why are you here? Why is anyone turning to Gordon Gee for any sign of progress or path forward? It's almost like a politician being in Congress for 60 years, then telling you in the 61st year, "Hey, it really sucks around here, but I'm the guy. I'm the guy that's going to fix this." Buddy, what have you been doing for the past 6 decades? I don't know exactly, Chris, how you get around some of these like figureheads. Like, well, if we're going to have this conversation, we got to get Gordon Gee involved because he's always been involved. But that to me is not an encouraging sign. And I don't know, maybe I should just treat presidents, chancellors, folks like that across universities like politicians, where what they say actually doesn't matter. The rules are made up. The points don't mean anything because they're just saying what they got to say in that moment in time. But why are guys like that seemingly required to be a part of these conversations when they've never done anything to advance the ball? As a matter of fact, in my humble estimation, they've been obstacles to progress. So do you think like within that room, there's more like pushback against doing things a new way? We want to go back to the old way? Or is somebody like that actually going to be someone that would aid in, figuring this thing out?
I think he's probably just a conduit to other college presidents on hearing the idea out would be my guess. And, I don't know how old Gordon Gee is, but he's been around as a school president for a long time. And
he's not dead yet. We got to play.
No. And
that was an agreement.
He may not even be on a campus in the next 5 to 7 years for all we know. Speaking of school presidents, by the way, shout out to the First Lady of Texas Tech University, Patty Skuvanek, who watches this show often. She has Cowan, you've got a fan, and Patty Skuvanek. Lawrence is our President Skuvanek's wife. Great people.
And I have not seen President Skuvanek in a bow tie, so that's encouraging.
That's right.
The bow tie boys, I'm a little suspicious of.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's
watching.
But he's like for Texas Tech, he and like Kirby, that's why, like in Gordon Gee is what he's doing here, but that's why it's always important whenever you see Kirby on this committee or President Skuvanek on that committee, or because you just don't want to get caught without knowing what's going on, and that's what I would guess here. The key to this deal, this College Sports Tomorrow, CST, whatever we're going to call it, the fact that the NFL has such a high-ranking official involved, because I'm sorry what anybody says, if you don't understand that the NFL is king over just sports and television and everything. They run this thing, man. They kind of keep themselves in the news 365. They have deals with every network, streaming platforms, network TV. They've created events out of non-events. I mean, it's wild, and they run this thing, right? And so when you put like Roger Goodell or somebody that high ranking on the board, or however they want to phrase what this group is, that is telling to me. That's serious because they're going to bring. That's why I think you see. Let's just create the college version of the NFL, kind of deal. So, and is that also, one could also say, Roger could say, hey, go down there and make sure that, that those college boys don't take any of our revenue, and like structure it in such a way that it doesn't infiltrate our piece of the pie. I could see where somebody would be like, well, that's the NFL's interest. They're trying to make sure that it stays away from what they've got going on too. But there's a lot of similarities here. And I think that's pretty telling, though, however you want to look at that one way or the other.
It's like the wise guys up in New York having a man down in Sarasota. Like Roger Goodell's like, well, what's our man down in Tuscaloosa saying? You've got to have somebody in the mix to preserve or protect your interests.
Like at Del Boca Vista.
That's exactly Del Boca. Okay. I don't know if we can stand another Seinfeld reference within a 30-minute program, but I'm here for all of them. How about me and you just get together and chop it up off the air after we're done, which is right now, Chris. Fun conversation to wrap up the week, man. Some good news for Red Raider basketball fans with Devin Cambridge, and looking for some more coming down the pipe as far as some new prospects, new targets on the other side of the weekend. So make sure you're here for next week's conversation. Appreciate the time as always, man, and enjoyed it. We'll see you on the other side.
Enjoy the weekend, people. Hey, we had a couple of Seinfeld references, but no breakfast cereal. We didn't talk breakfast cereal. We could do that again if we needed to. But anyway, enjoy the weekend. Keep hope alive, everybody, and keep your head on a swivel out there as it relates to it's a portal season.
That's right. That's right. And I'll go ahead and preserve our commitment here. As podcast hosts, we will remain committed to this program. We are still not into the podcast portal, so you can count on us to be back on the other side of the weekend. Hope to be able to count on you. So subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.